Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO Podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Chris, thanks so much for being here. Caito, good to see you again.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me,
Back
guys.
again.
Absolutely.
Excited about it.
All right, everybody. Today's guest is Chris Ronzio, the founder and CEO of Trainual, someone who's been on the roller coaster of entrepreneurship since he was a teenager. Chris built and sold his first company before he turned 25. And since then, he's helped thousands of businesses systemize and scale through Trainual, which is now used in over 180 countries. That's crazy. He's also been through the MAP 2.5-day workshop, which we love. So he knows what it means to focus, lead, and grow with discipline and accountability. Today, we're going to learn all about Chris's journey, about Trainual, about what they're doing now, how he thinks about scaling and systems, and things that will help you apply to your business. So Chris, thanks so much for being here, man. We appreciate it. We're excited to dive in.
Let's do it.
All right.
Hey,
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm trying to think, Chris, where did you and I first meet?
I think we met through Scott Fritz.
Yeah, Fritz had to be.
I saw your face actually in a testimonial video that you did when I was at the MAP workshop. And so I think my first exposure ever to you was on the screen talking about your delivery business and like how helpful MAP was for you. And then after that, I just heard your name from other people, Elaine Porter, I think, and Scott Fritz. And
Yeah, that's the crew. Yeah, that's right. Fritz, the 40-hour work year. You know, that's funny because when we shot that video for the workshop, I was just a client of MAP. And the fact that so weird that I was their video, and then I bought the company. Just hilarious.
Full circle, meant to happen.
And that video is still used today.
And it's pretty bad, bro.
It's pretty old.
They've got me. They're like,
did you have hair back then?
He did. No, you were bald then. You were still bald then. You must have gone bald early like me.
I think it was more like I was shaving it for style, and now I shave it out of necessity. So
yeah, I'm right there with you, brother. I'm right there with you.
Okay, AG, I'm gonna let you take over because you know that we'll never get a question in here.
That's fair. All right, before we dive into the 1,000 questions that we have, Chris, tell the audience, I gave a brief background, but maybe just a little bit more about yourself and about Trainual.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I built and sold my first company when I was young. It was a video production company that did youth sporting events in all 50 states. And so training, onboarding remotely was such a huge part of what we did. And so when I sold that business, I had these other entrepreneur friends who were struggling with packaging together their systems, their brand, their processes. And I started helping people in a consulting fashion and then created Trainual as a little prototype and years later spun it into the business it is today. So Trainual is a software company. We help capture all of a company's information, their knowledge about who's who does what, and how things are done so that you can get your new people up to speed and keep all your existing people up to date.
That's awesome.
AG, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to do this.
No, go ahead, dude.
Chris, but when you had that business, what was, there's a story you've told me about, or I've heard you talk about you had your one business and you realized that you could use technology to help them. And that's where the Genesis of Trainual was used.
Yeah.
Started. What's that story? Because it's fascinating.
Yeah. So after I sold my company, I was consulting one at a time for different friends' businesses and then friends of friends. And I found myself getting up to speed on a company for the first few days I was there. And it was like I was a new employee going through an orientation. So I had to learn about their culture and who did what and their org chart and their responsibilities, their processes, their tech in order to get up to speed and be a good consultant, right? And so then the more I worked with these companies, I saw everybody's info is just scattered everywhere. It was in docs and in their shared drive and in their intranet and in their email templates and Dropbox folders. And for them to express how their business worked was really challenging for new people. And so there was this one company I worked with. They were a t-shirt design company. They had a retail shop and they had this big production kind of equipment where you'd make custom t-shirts. And they had a 60-page PDF document. That's how they trained their new employees. And because they employed college kids, like every year they would have 60 people or something turn over and they'd send them this 60-page document. And I thought, this is nuts. There has to be a better way to do this. And so we started crafting like a little online system that would teach people everything they needed to know in some quick videos and some text, and they would just click through and get up to speed. And that is what became Trainual.
Wow.
It's a great story. Yeah.
And was there a moment when like you realized that would scale?
Yeah. I mean, early on, so we started the tool in 2015 in my consulting firm. We used it just for consulting clients in 15, 16, 17. And it was kind of towards the end of 2017 where people were referring it out to strangers that didn't want my consulting, but they just wanted to use the tool that their friend was using. And so I started having like a couple dozen companies on this that I didn't even know personally, and they're paying me $100 a month or something to use it. And that was when I thought, okay, there's something here. There is a tool here that could grow beyond just the services I can do.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Going back, so I'm still fascinated. You started your first business at 14 and then sold that, and it scaled nationally. Like, dude, that's pretty crazy. Not a lot of 14-year-olds do that.
Yeah.
Like, where'd that come from?
Well, at first it was just having fun with one of my friends. We had this like kids TV show. It was like a news station show where we would interview people around town. And then we put our show on the cable access station in my town. And because there was like no other shows on there, our show would run like 50 times a week. And so in the supermarket, people would come up to us and be like, hey, you're the kids from TV. Like, can you film my grandpa's birthday or whatever it was? And so we started getting these little offers. And then the school asked us to start filming events. And it started with soccer games, and then it went into like a big cheerleading championship that was held at our school. And as a 15-year-old, that was like the best thing in the world I could be invited to do for money. And so I thought, okay, there is a repeatable business here, going to these like sporting events, these championships. And so we started doing all events, and it scaled from just my state in Massachusetts to doing events around New England, then up and down the East Coast. Then I started bidding on national contracts. And what I saw is that I was up against a lot of just local videographers. And for somebody that had events nationally, the consistency of one company that could show up in 16 different cities and do their events was huge. And so that's how the business started to grow.
Wow. That's pretty amazing, man. That's pretty incredible.
When you sold it, how old were you when you sold that one?
I was 25.
Yeah. First exit.
Like 5 years ago.
I wish. No. I was like 25 when I transitioned out, and I think I might have been 26 when it sold, but something like that. Yeah.
Do you look back at that and you're like, man, I wish I had done X, Y, Z? I mean, it's a pretty amazing journey, but like now, after being through so many companies and now with Trainual, all these years of experience, you look back and you're like, man, I should have done this or this and taken it here. Or do you look back and say, hey, man, we did a great job?
Well, that was an education.
Yeah.
That business was just real world education. Like I went to college with that business, and I would sit there in school and we would be learning how to do a marketing plan, or I'd be learning how to do a P&L, and I would use my business as the homework, as the case study. And other students were learning this kind of like philosophical stuff, and I was putting it to work. And every week my business was getting better. And so it was, I think, the fastest way to learn because I had this real world application.
For sure. You learn so much more by doing. Absolutely. It's like a crash course. I wish we could have. So, go ahead.
Yeah, go, Andrew. I was just going to say, I wish we could have, when we started our business in college, but it just started ramping too fast, the food delivery business, and we had to drop out. So I never got to like get to the meat, in years 3 and 4 that I could maybe apply. But who knows if I could have did that? I mean, I would have had to probably be in my MBA program to do that. But
I didn't know you guys were still in college when you started Rotor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we just had to drop out.
If I dropped out, maybe I would have had a better exit like you. But for me, it was just like, like you and Mark Zuckerberg. I stayed with school. I was putting everything to use. Again, it was just practical application. And so it was scaling very organically, little by little, year after year, just doing more events. The hardest part about the business was how quickly technology was changing, which I think is really benefiting me now with how quick tech is changing. But you got to understand, like the 10 years, the decade or so that I was in that business, we went from shooting video on VHS tapes and these big over-the-shoulder cameras and editing on nonlinear edit. We weren't even using computers to edit. We had like 2 VCRs, and you're spinning dials and setting in and out points and playing the video back in slow motion to find your cut point. We went from that to 10 years later, like Blu-ray discs and online live streaming and USB flash drives that we'd hand out at events, and you'd take the video home with you, and tiny cameras that are recording on hard drives. Like, so much changed in that business. We had to get new cameras every 6 months. And so I think in addition to the training, it also taught me so much about technology and change management. And that's a big part of what I do today as well.
And now we have tools that will just edit the video with AI with a click of one button.
Right.
It's pretty crazy.
The video business would have been a lot easier now. I was texting some of my friends from that business and past employees, and I bought my first tripod in like 12 years because my son is now doing club basketball and I wanted to film one of his games. And it's so funny, like looking at the products that are available right now, I feel like an old man, but cool.
Well, we got to ask, because you went through the 2.5 day workshop. So I'm curious, what led you there? You've been through a lot. You've been in business since you were a teenager, which is crazy. Are there things that stand out when you think back to what you learned or absorbed in that workshop?
Yeah, of course. So what led me there was people kept talking about MAP. And I just kept hearing the acronym and didn't really know what it was. And then I was in EO, and one of my mentors at the time had gone through the program for his business. And he was the most structured entrepreneur I had ever seen. He had this cadence of how he operated his business. And I think he was working with, a coach or advisor, every month, something like that. And I just so respected how he ran the business. And so I stayed after one of our meetings one time and asked him to tell me about the program. And he made an email introduction. I found out about the workshop. I said, maybe, I'm consulting now. Maybe this is something I can encourage a bunch of my clients to do. And so I booked the trip out and went to the couple days. The thing that stuck with me the most is the self-awareness that I gained through the 360 input. And I had never really asked people for that input before. And so I think in just 2 or 3 days, I took a massive leap forward in terms of understanding my own gaps and how people perceived me and how I could show up better. And that was something that I never really took the time. I was always focused on how to improve my business systems and not how to improve my personal systems. And that was huge for me.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's a great answer. I have not heard that answer yet.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm taking notes here.
I think the 360, I totally agree with you, man. I think the 360 feedback is powerful. For me, when I went through, which was years ago, I had never done the disc before. So just seeing the disc report, and similarly, it's like you're getting a lens into you and you're like, okay, well, this is just my style, right? And now I understand how to communicate with other people's styles. I thought that was powerful. And I think a lot of people have never done that before, had that assessment.
Yeah.
But the 360 is good.
Another thing I thought was cool is you're in a room with all these different people from all these different businesses, at every level of a business and in different management roles. And it sort of like threw me back into being in college and being in a group project setting where you see who emerges as different leaders in a new group and which people have which roles. And I thought that dynamic for those couple of days was so interesting too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I like that. That's good.
When a lot of people go to the workshop, they say it's like a fire hose of information, right? Like you're learning all these different things, but then you have to go back and apply them, right? And It's funny, like we talk about AI. I think about AI now, like any idea, there's no shortage of ideas anymore, right? You can give it AI any prompt and have just like a 30-page document of ideas. So now it's about, I think, execution, like who can really go and execute and implement. When you think about like the friction between the strategy and execution, we talk about that a lot at MAP. Like, what do you think, where do you see friction between those two, or where do people fall down? And like, how do you guys approach that within Trainual as you guys are scaling?
I think it all comes down to accountability and the cadence of how you measure what you're expecting. And so you can have a great strategy and everybody can be all rah-rah, on board, aligned with your strategy. And then everybody can have the best intentions and take the first steps. But then if you don't constantly recalibrate and say, is this strategy still right? Is what were our results from last week? What are we going to do differently this next upcoming week? I think that's where things break down. And so in my earlier businesses, I don't think I had that muscle. And even though we had some success and we scaled, I think that my accountability was sporadic. I would just let things go. I would not watch areas of the business. It was kind of like a hope and pray strategy. And we like, fell into success in some ways just through luck. And now with Trainual, we have a lot more disciplined approach to how our leaders get together, to what KPIs we're looking at, to how we're measuring the business, to how we're doing strategic planning. And I think it requires that rigid structure if you want more predictable success.
I totally agree. What are the main KPIs that you guys care about?
So our KPIs, we have different ones for every department. They roll up into 10 different metrics that we look at on a weekly basis. And so we put them in 3 categories for us as a SaaS company, which is revenue, retention, and runway. And so as a SaaS company, you always want to make sure you've got infinite runway ahead of you. If we've raised venture dollars, you want to know how you're putting those to work and how far you are from profitability or how you're getting back to that. And so revenue for us is about the new sales that we brought in last week. It's about the growth rate and tracking our growth rate. It's about the percentage of customers that are of our ICP or our ideal customer size. It's about the percentage of orders that are coming in as annual plans, which is our preferred plan for commitment. On the retention side, we're looking at upgrades, downgrades, cancellations, and just like the net result of all that on a monthly basis. And then the runway element, of course, looking at cash and profitability.
That's awesome.
It's so funny the way you talked about the discipline to get leaders together, to look at the right things, to make adjustments. I like to say the whole reason we plan is so that we can then unplan. And what I mean by that is you build this plan for the year. And unless you have a cadence, which, I always prefer a monthly disciplined cadence of looking at your business and doing a deep dive and seeing what's working and not working, that's where we make the adjustments on a month to month basis. You're probably going to look at a few months and look at trends, but because you have a plan, you can then say, what are we going to stop doing and what are we going to start doing versus just saying, let's go do this and let's go do that without making any trade-offs. And so important for us as entrepreneurs to do that. I love your process of rolling everything up the way we do it similarly at MAPS.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and likewise, we have our monthly leadership cadence. We bring in, our directors for a certain part of the meeting. We've got our VPs and above for another part of the meeting. Then we've got our quarterly planning. We've got our annual planning. We've got our kind of 3 to 5 year planning. And I think it all waterfalls back from that. When you know where you're going, and then you can step back and say, what are we doing every quarter? What are we doing every month? What are we doing every week? And make sure everyone's accountable. And then it comes down to being great managers, and listening to people and holding people accountable and empowering people. And that is like in that analogy where you've got the rocks and the pebbles and the sand and the water, like the water that covers everything is great management.
It becomes so much that's when you're actually running the business and the business running you, right? Like you guys are like running it. It sounds like a well-oiled machine. I'm sure there's always chaos, or maybe there isn't, but most businesses, there's still chaos that happens. But it sounds like you guys have it dialed in with your systems and your planning, and you have the KPIs and you have the accountability systems where you're, running it well.
Yeah, I don't think we even have that much chaos. I think chaos is like an input that can come into your business. And if you don't have a system for catching the chaos and processing it and dividing it and triaging it, then it remains chaos and it creates stress for people. But if you have the right systems in place, then the chaos that comes in just turns into the list of priorities that you're going to manage in the business. And so that's how I feel we're set up.
Andrew, what I love that, Chris, what you just said was you put a system, a cadence of how you're going to run your business and hold people accountable. And then it comes down to great managers. And a lot of companies miss training their managers, because if you can train your managers the right way, and then you can put that system, like you just mentioned, around them, you can take ordinary managers and turn them into extraordinary managers. And a lot of times the system of accountability will enforce that. How do you develop your managers? How do you turn them into great managers?
Well, There's a few answers here. So first, internally, we want to train them within our walls and make sure that we're passing down the best practices from what we've done when we were in those positions. And so when the company was just me and a handful of people and we did all of the roles, we had our way of doing what we did that was our best practice. And as we created new roles and stepped into new positions, you have to delegate and hand off the things that you used to do that now new people are doing. And so that's part of what happens in Trainual, is handing off those best practices that are existing. But then every new person that inherits a best practice, an area of the business, they develop this ownership to be able to innovate and to improve it. And so the way that that's done changes internally. And it can be done based on their own experimentation, or it can be done based on external inputs, like going out and getting some professional development training, like going to an event, like going to a workshop like yours. And so we invest in our managers, both internally and externally, to make sure that they're constantly refining their best practices, but also getting new ideas.
Yeah. I love.
I'll give you an example too, like chaos in a business. So yesterday we had, like, within a single hour, something like 7,000 support tickets that came in, or 7,000. And that's way outside of the norm. And so we have a system that's set up that alerts people when there's anything that's outside of the norm. And it turns out it was this, it was like an attack that comes in all the time through different IP addresses. As a SaaS company, we deal with this constantly. But we had an alert system set up. We had a protocol of who's going to handle that. We knew exactly which dials to turn off. And because we've been through this before, we were able to set up a bulk ticket script that would process all those tickets and get them out of our ticketing system for our sales reps. Within like an hour, the problem's solved, and like our CTO tells everybody, on our communication channel, like, this is no longer a problem. And so something like that, if you don't have the systems in place, can be totally chaotic.
Yeah.
But as you figure it out and you put the systems in place, the accountabilities in place, something like that is just another day. And when you scale a business, the things that could break at any given time get vaster and vaster if you don't have the systems in place.
Great point.
Yeah, you guys are prepared. That's awesome.
Hi, if you're a CEO out there who's struggling with focus for your company, aligning your team, accountability, if you're struggling with execution, connecting the dots from where you're at to where you want to be, we've got a great program for you here at MAP. My name is Michael Caito. I'm the CEO. Most importantly, I was a client for 15 years, sold my company to a public company, and then bought MAP so that we can help other entrepreneurs with this specific problem. We're a 60-year-old company. We've worked with 170,000 individual executives and CEOs. We've worked with 15,000 organizations. This is what we do. Click the link below to learn a little bit more about how people just like you, CEOs, have transformed their business and ultimately transformed their life by running through the MAP system.
So thinking about, we talked about like the chasm or between strategy and execution, and like MAP, when people leave the workshop, they have to go and then do the implementation and operationalize it. I think that weaves into Trainual. So for folks who don't know what Trainual does, for those businesses, like, how does Trainual help people to systemize, to operationalize things, and then help with execution?
Yeah, so Trainual contains all of your, again, business knowledge if you're getting a new person up to speed. And that can be your orientation content. It can be teaching about your culture and your values and your vision and your ideal customer and your products and services. So you want everybody to, of course, have that information handy. But then you've got your standard operating procedures, your policies, your workflows, the tech tools that you use in the business. And all of these things have different owners within the company. They all have different people that are responsible for innovating, or people that you'd go to if you have questions about those things. And so Trainual becomes the place where you manage that source of truth for who does what and how things are done in the business. And so it starts at that ownership level of accountability, who does what in the business, who owns what in the business, and one person can't do it all. And so, you use Trainual to sort of divide and conquer and explain who is responsible for which areas performing like they're supposed to in the business. What does good look like? What are the measurements that we're using to decide if we're performing well on this? All that goes into Trainual. And then as your best practices change, as your scripts change, as your, objections change in sales, as your workflows change for any operational thing you do, you update it in the system and it alerts anybody that's responsible for that to go back and get up to speed on the newest version. And so what it's really doing is, again, it's that source of truth, that source of ownership, and then it's the reassurance that everybody is reading from the same playbook.
It's as I like that analogy. I've seen you on an Instagram post use the analogy of, you know how sometimes there's that one person in your company that has the answer to all the questions that you go to her for everything you need to know? That's what Trainual is for your business.
Yeah. We say Trainual is like your longest tenured, most valuable employee that knows everything about your business.
Don't get me going on the great Instagram posts that you guys have. I
you
love
guys
those.
do have some good stuff. You have good social for sure,
bro. Like Andrew, have you seen when Chris is there and he's got
the hats?
This is probably 5. You got like 7 hats on.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Like,
they do a good job.
Lots of good memes. On that topic, great memes. But I mean, I'm gonna go. I'll let you get back to what your next question is, Andrew. But like, Chris, when was it just feels like something changed a few years ago in your business. It was like you were building Trainual and it was, you were figuring out what to call it and how to explain it. And then all of a sudden, bam, this thing came out with the hats. And then you started doing some other things. And all of a sudden it was like, it became crystal clear for clients that are like, hey, this is your playbook. Or like, how did all that come together that all of a sudden everything changed and it just felt like your messaging was just spot on?
I'd like to tell you it was some big master plan and I'm like a mastermind that figured this out, but I think it's a combination of just riding the trends and understanding what people are talking about at the entrepreneurial events and where people are struggling. And they were stitching together all these different systems. And we created this sort of hybrid tool that was a mix of an intranet and a wiki and a knowledge base and a learning management system. And it's like, let's just make it easy. And it helps organize and train your people. And so a little bit of it is us noticing the trends. And then a little bit of it is us just listening and hearing what customers are saying as they respond on those social posts or as they review us on the websites. And so our messaging got clearer and clearer as we heard what customers were getting and benefiting from the software, and so I think we learned so much, and so much of our copywriting came from the reviews, the testimonials, the social media copy. Mm-hmm. And I think any business can do that. If you ask people what they like about your business, why they work with you, use their words as your marketing copy. And it doesn't have to be a quote, but you want to use the same words, the same way that they're talking about the problem to find more customers that have the same problem.
You know what? That's brilliant. I sit here and try to figure out how to talk about it. And it's like, I just need to do more of that.
Yep. Listen to your customers, listen to your clients. They're going to tell you. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you're not giving yourself enough credit, man. You guys were obviously paying very close attention to your customers and then learning and then iterating it back into the product and back in the messaging. And then that's how it just snowballed. And obviously it worked incredibly well.
And it's easier now, even with AI, it's like we can have 100 versions of our website that are personalized based on who's looking at it. And there's so many cool tools out there now, but even with the most basic website with one landing page, if you just ask your 5 customers what they like about you, you can make your copy better to attract better customers.
That's right. Yeah. That was a great segue. Great segue point. Because we've said AI a couple of times. I'm curious, you guys are a SaaS business, you're in tech. How do you guys think about AI at Trainual?
Well, first of all, it's everywhere in the product already. So, people are creating content with AI. You can search your account and the AI chat thing gives you an answer about anything about your business that you have access to. So it's deep into the product for brainstorming and outlining and connecting things. And then we use it in every aspect of running the business too. So whether it's, processing the transcripts of sales calls to get smarter about objections and how we pitch our demos, or our marketing team scanning our most popular social media posts and creating more that are exactly like those, or our support team answering the lowest hanging fruit questions with chat and automatically writing new knowledge base articles to make those not be chats in the future. Like there's so many places you can deploy AI. The way I explained it to the team is it's not about, there's a lot of conversation about AI cutting jobs, reducing workforce. And I think that's crazy. I'm not trying to reduce my workforce. I'm trying to make my workforce more productive. I'm trying to increase their bandwidth.
Yeah, and exactly.
So I see AI as like going from a screwdriver to a power drill. You know, it's like, how can I do more work in a day and be more productive? And it hurts my arm less to use the tool. Like, that's what AI is doing for people. And so we can grow more with the same people we already have and put them in roles that are higher and better use of their time because they don't have to do the mundane work anymore. And so we're using AI across the board.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
That's a great way. You know, there's so many people out there acting out of fear. And when really that's like I probably actually, I don't even know if I talked about this at your conference. It's like, it's not about that. It's about how are we going to use AI to get more productive? We're not, like, my first thing with AI is, like most CEOs' first thing is not let's cut jobs. It's let's take the screw and turn it into a power drill.
Yeah.
And I love what how do you say his name? Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way.
That's the Gary V. I heard him recently say, if you're 20 years, if I was 20 years old, I'd be spending every waking hour learning AI.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like, I mean, the tools that are out there are absolutely, we don't use it as, we're integrating it into our tech platform right now, but Andrew's integrated it throughout marketing and sales. So it's been unbelievable.
I mean, it's crazy not to. It's just like you mentioned, it's just it's an amplifier. I view it as that. It's like, you know, if you can do, if it takes you 10 hours to do something, it'll take you 10 minutes now. It's good. You can get 10x more done. It's just, he actually interviewed somebody else in the podcast, and the way he put it, which I really liked, he's like, it's the world's best thought partner. Imagine going on a walk and you have access to, on your phone, every person in the world and the most brilliant people that know everything and can spit every idea back to you in a blink of an eye. It's just incredible. And so not using that would be crazy.
Yeah.
It's a cheat code.
I'm telling you, every team is using, like, our developers are putting out code and putting out features in an hour that used to take 3 weeks. Yeah. Like, we actually had features that were estimated at 3 weeks, and then they used the Windsurf IDE. It's one of these tools, and it took less than an hour to do the same feature. You know, our designers are saying, like, look at all the designs I've made in the past and look at the modules of, like, what everything looks like in our product, the components, and make a page that has this, and this, and it just makes the prototype, you know? And so everything is happening faster, and, like, people really need to embrace this right now. But I think the idea that you'd cut staff is crazy. Like, the people are going to emerge as winners because they can grow so much more quickly, and they can have a higher revenue per FTE based on their revenue growing instead of based on their FTEs shrinking.
That's fair. Yep. Yeah. It should be, how do we get more out of our people using it? How do people use it in the smartest way possible, in the most efficient way possible? I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Well, I'm curious. So Mike mentioned. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Yep. Well, you go first, then I'll jump in.
I was going to
still trying to figure this co-host thing out. Okay.
You go. Fire yours off.
Chris, this podcast is called the Entrepreneurial CEO. And the reason it's called that is I have a backstory of when I had to make that transition. It's that moment when I knew that as an entrepreneur, I could carry the business on my back just so far. And then I realized, well, I need to make that transition of, like, having that excitement and passion of an entrepreneur, but I need the other side, which is the discipline of a CEO. And I remember that moment distinctly in our business and when I realized I have to change. Can you recall when that moment happened for you at Trainual?
Yeah, it was probably when we had a full leadership team, when we had a leader kind of at a VP level over every department. Because when that happened, we had people in place that were functionally better at everything in the company than me. And my job became, you know, being having eyes across the company and helping them see things that maybe they didn't see across the company, but having a much tighter hold on our vision. And it was kind of like, okay, I'm responsible for ushering the company and all my leaders toward this vision and keeping them synchronized. And that takes me constantly thinking about the vision and innovating the vision. And it takes me constantly synchronizing the teams and being disciplined about that. And so that happened, I think, over the last few years.
That's interesting because you were further along on the journey. I feel like I was good at certain things and we had certain leadership, but it feels like you were a little further along, that you had figured out the importance of having better people than yourself in each discipline. And so, but what that says to me, you know, Andrew, we talk about this, it's like that jump, that entrepreneur to CEO kind of chasm. I almost feel like you have to cross it at various times in your development as a CEO. Like, I crossed it early at the 4-year mark of the business. Okay. But then I had to probably have a different chasm to cross that was related to, I was still entrepreneur. I was still thinking like an entrepreneur in this thing, like your example. And now I needed to act like a CEO. So I've just been thinking about that lately. I think we have to cross it. It's like those valleys of death that you might see back in Accelerator when you were in the Accelerator group and they show the valleys of death. It's kind of like that same thing exists for you, for us as entrepreneurs converting to CEO.
Yeah, I've heard that at different employee count sizes or at different revenue sizes. Well, one of my mentors late, he talks about the ones and the threes in business. And he said that like who you are and how you run the business when you're a solopreneur that makes 100K versus a business making 300K with a few friends versus a business making $1 million versus a business making 3 million to 10 million to 30 million to 100 million. At every one of those thresholds, you kind of have to reinvent the leadership team and your role as a CEO. And so I don't feel like where I am right now, it's done. Like I've reached some perfect state. I feel like I'm just in a comfortable state in our current tranche.
But you're going to get uncomfortable again at another level.
Absolutely.
What do you do for that? How do you evolve? How do you make sure you're evolving at those different stages?
It's the same as, I guess the only difference to this answer versus the manager question you asked me is that I don't have someone within the walls of the business that's teaching me how to be a CEO at the next stage. And so that's where I have mentors that are a stage or two ahead of me that I'm meeting with often. I have peer groups of others that are running bigger businesses. And then I source out or seek out external education. And so the thing I'm doing right now, I'm at this 3-year program at Harvard Business School that it's an alumni program. It's a legit intensive where you spend a month of every year on campus. And I did that to challenge myself to get back in a classroom setting and learn from some of the best professors in the world and be around 150 other CEOs from around the world that got into this prestigious program. And that's how I'm learning like what happens at this next phase to then pull me up.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
Andrew's coming back. I go to Columbia Business School every summer for a week. And
awesome.
And we built that. Some friends and I share it for YPO. And we just now opened it up to key executives. Finally. So Andrew's coming with me this summer. It'll be fun.
That's cool.
That's a week. It's going to be fun.
Really cool. Yeah, be great. Well, look, we like to ask people on the show, we try to make this actionable for our audience. And so is there something, you mentioned the different KPIs you have and how it all zippers up or the different systems you have. Is there something that you guys do at Trainual differently or something that you do that you might be able to share that people listening might be able to take back and implement in their business to help them, do things more efficiently or grow or be a better manager, CEO?
Let's see. I think what comes to mind first is one of our core values is make ideas happen. And when I was consulting and I would interview the people that worked at these different businesses, I heard so many great ideas and so many opportunities. And the problem was execution, that things just didn't happen, that people didn't go from idea to execution quick enough. And so make ideas happen at Trainual is all about, as soon as we have a good idea, we want to test it. We want to experiment. We want to put it to work and validate or invalidate it very quickly so that good ideas don't sit on the shelf. Because if they sit on the shelf too long, then people stop coming up with them. They want to know that you're listening and taking them seriously. And so for me, that immediate action translates personally to everything from I end every day at inbox 0, because when I see an email, I make a decision. It's like, why would I wait around on this? I'm either going to reply to it, I'm going to archive it, I'm going to send it to someone else, I'm going to delete it, I'm going to put it on my to-do list that I got to work on later. But I end the day at inbox 0 because why look at something over and over again? Personally, like even this morning, I was like in a rush, just jumping into the cold shower. It's like, whatever, jump, you don't have to wait for things to happen. You just jump in and you deal with it. And I think too many people hesitate, and I've developed the discipline to just go, just jump.
That's awesome. As an inbox 5,000 guy, I don't understand how you get to inbox 0, but I respect it and I appreciate it. I just don't understand how you get there.
I'll give you
go ahead.
I'll give you a tip. Select all, archives.
Are you okay? Is it just delete? I mean,
you don't have to delete, just archive them. Then you can still search for them, but they're out of your inbox. I think about emails kind of like getting a mail in your actual physical mailbox, getting a letter, and it's like there's something in there that you need. Maybe there's a check that you need to bring to the bank and deposit. That's like a task that goes on your to-do list. Maybe it's just something that you needed to read and acknowledge, and now you throw it in the trash, and now you know about it. Maybe it's something you need to put on your wife's desk or whatever, and because it's for someone else. Like, that's how our digital inboxes are. But I think too many people just sit in the indecision and the procrastination. And if you can't execute in your inbox, it's going to be hard to execute on bigger things.
That is so true. So true, because you look at your inbox, like mine's not at 0 right now. It's close to 0, but I will look tomorrow at 5 emails that I looked at today and didn't act on them. So now I'm back at it a second time. And all that does is clog my brain. And then I'm not working on the most important thing.
Exactly. And if you can't do it yourself, you could get an assistant that does it for you as well. So my assistant's in my inbox, and she helps kind of triage and delete things and write things down and put things on our daily stand-up. And that helps a lot too.
Mike, you have any more questions? I have one more.
I asked both questions that I wanted to ask. So let's go ahead and wrap up, and we'll stay on track.
Yeah, I'm curious, man. Like, we were at the Trainual event, the event you guys put on was fantastic, by the way. It was super well done. We really enjoyed it.
We had fun.
Great presenters. You guys did great on stage, and just an overall great event. But I was really fascinated by the stories that you guys told about not only the business, but your personal lives. And like, you and your brother have both done really cool stuff, like running the marathon in Antarctica. And I saw on LinkedIn, you're like now a certified sommelier, like really cool stuff. It's number one, I don't know how you do it, because I know you also have a family, the scaling business. How the hell do you find time for all this stuff? And where's that drive come from?
The drive comes from just growth. I think we all exist and are here for helping others and for learning and growing and collecting experiences. And I want every year to be a better version than last year. I think when your years start getting worse, it starts being less fun to be around. So I want every year to be better than the last. My wife and I have this really, again, disciplined cadence of annual planning personally, where we go away somewhere for a night or two and we reflect on the past year and we talk about the next year, and we each come up with our big goals, our top 10 goals for the year. And it could be things that we want to do together. It could be things apart. It could be learning new things, taking courses, going new places, things we want to do with the family. So we have this whole process we go through to get us to our goals for the year. And all these experiences I've had, the marathons and the mountains and the crazy trips and the certifications have been as a result of doing that exercise and coming up with a new fun idea of like, what do I want to do that's different this year?
I'm stealing that. That's really good. I like that a lot.
Jesse Itzler has something like that that he talks about.
Yeah, he has a great take on it. They have a concept, I think it's a Japanese concept called a masogi, where you have like a one thing that defines your year and one big extreme event or it's something. It could be write a book, it could be a adventure you're going on, it could be something physical, whatever it is. And so he's a great one to look into as well. I
could walk around and go see here. I've got my big ass calendar over here that keeps me organized.
I always see that thing, man. We have one at the house too. I love that big ass calendar. That's a
cool. Great tip. Same thing. I mean, you plan, Andrew, you asked about like, how do you fit everything in? It's, you start with the family stuff, like at the beginning of the year, I schedule random Fridays off so I can do long weekends and pick the kids up at school and whatever. I have trips with each of my kids independently. I have trips that I go on with my wife. We go to a lot of Phoenix Suns games here in Phoenix, and it's something we like to do. So all that stuff gets put on the calendar. And then business kind of schedules around it.
Can we not talk about basketball, please?
I know.
Neither of us have a lot to talk about here.
Sore subject.
Did you see that ending last night of the Nuggets?
I did. I can't believe they won. But
I can't believe they beat my Clippers. But
the fact that we're still talking about it means we're real fans. All right,
just real fans.
Mike has he's a tortured
fan you'll ever meet.
Clippers fan, you're a Bills fan, you're a Sabres fan. It's just tortured existence.
I don't win anything. No, it's tough. That's why we have to build another company and sell it and then buy a team, and maybe that'll be the winner.
There you go. Or you might bring them bad luck. I don't know, dude. You might not want
Destroy a whole city.
Yeah.
It's funny.
All right.
Well, Chris, man, this has been great. We could probably keep you on forever and ask you questions. Thank you for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it. For folks, where can they go to learn more about you or Trainual?
So you can find me online, mostly on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm just Chris Ronzio on LinkedIn, at Chris Ronzio on Instagram if you want to see the day in the life. And then Trainual is just trainual.com or any of the social channels. So thanks, guys. This was fun.
Yeah.
Great time today.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Chris. Thank you again. And thank you everybody for listening. And we will see you next time. All right.
Good job, AG.
Bye, guys.